everyone. Today we're going to talk about how books have changed my perspective on the world, and more importantly, how these books have so significantly changed my perspective that I no longer see the world the same way after reading them. The first one I read was called A New Earth by Eckhart. Tolle still is called that, and I read it in August of 2020 when I had just graduated from college. I graduated in May of 2020 during the pandemic. I was living in the Cape. I had a brand new job. I was 5 minutes from the beach, and I should have been happier than I've ever been, and I was facing a past situation that I had never let myself come to terms with before, and I realized that it was going to be a very long journey to overcome what happened in that experience and to face everything that I had dealt with up until that point with just growing up and being a person of this world. You've experienced a lot of things and you don't know how to process them or to understand them until you finally get to a point, usually, and you have to. So this book was one of the first ones I read on that journey after there was a moment where I realized if a certain choice that I was about to make was going to be either the start of a very dark path or a brand new one that would eventually lead me to a better life and have a better story, than the one that I could predict would just be a bad one. So this book really changed the course of a lot of things for me. It opened up my eyes to looking at my own decisions and to be more intentional with them, and to realize that I am the person who has to deal with the consequences of every choices that I make, and that I have had to deal with the consequences of all these choices, and that is something that I will have to do for the rest of my life. And this book talks about a pain body, which is something that we all have. It is where we are storing all of these hurts and guilt and shame, and that we are feeding into that story of that past every time we are following the same decisions that we've always made, and that it is up to us to decide to make different ones. So the fact that this book was one of the first ones I read starting this path of making a better choice was really important, and I found a lot of meaning in it. And it is one of the books that I have gone back to, and one that I have reread over this journey over these past 4 years. And now that it is almost 4 years later, it will be in August that I started this journey of creating again and sharing with the world and sharing with myself different versions of myself that I've kept locked away. Has been really important and really difficult and beautiful and scary and daunting, and will continue, because there is no book that you read, there's no choice that you make that transforms you completely. It is all one step at a time, and that you aren't really trying to become anyone, you are just trying to be. And that is really what this book is about. It is becoming present with this moment in time and understanding that as long as you have the ability to stand up and say yes or no, you have the ability to change your life, and that everything that has held you back is something that can equally be the thing that moves you forward. You can choose to explore the past and understand it and ask all the questions. You can choose to let it go and just say, I just don't want this to have an effect on me anymore. And you can take plenty of other routes as well. It's up to you, and you get to decide. And that is really where all of this intentionality has come and gone in my life. There's definitely times where I've made more intentional choices than others and had to deal with the consequences regardless. So this one is really trying to say, hey, there's consequences you're gonna face, but try to do it with the understanding that you get to choose again. And that was the most important thing that I got away from this, was you get to choose again. If you made a choice you didn't like, you don't have to choose it anymore. You can say yes to a different version of yourself. And my favorite thing that I read was actually at the very beginning, where they talk about flowers and butterflies and birds and gemstones being the transcendent other halves of most of nature. Most plants don't have pretty flowers, most rocks aren't precious stones, and most animals can't fly, and most bugs can't fly. But there are certain few that have been enlightened with a new perspective. They offer a different view of the world, and that capacity is available in all of us if we choose to see it that way. And that was literally like the first opening line, talking about a perspective that I have never considered before in my life, but we've always valued roses and beautiful diamonds and butterflies and birds. And it's very true. It doesn't matter where you go. These are all symbols of hope and peace and joy, and that there is meaning behind it, and that there is the ability for us to encompass that as well. So highly, highly recommend it. It was the book that guided this journey thus far, and I was on very much a big high by the end of 2020, and I was creating a lot, and then I hit a wall. I had no idea what I was going to do next with my life. I was in ruins, it felt, in some ways. I had to move out of the apartment I was living in the Cape because it got too cold and my apartment wouldn't warm up because it was usually just a summer rental. Had to move back in with my parents and had to face a lot of the underlying issues from childhood that many of us just experienced just by being children, but also the nuances that my life had as my parents were refugees to this country, which will come in later with some of those books. And had to get into a state of, all right, well, it was great to start off this journey in this, oh my God, like life is great when I'm on my own and not in the presence of the people who I grew up with. But when I was there, I had to face a lot of things. And that is when this book really came in. I read this, I believe it was May 21, and I had to take about a month or two to read it because it was just opening so many different discussions in my mind about the life that I've lived so far and the experiences that I've had, that I was quite literally in the process of letting go as I was reading this book. And that is actually how he opens his book, saying that this might take you a while to read, and that's okay, but you will be a lighter version of yourself because you will understand why it's so important to let things go. And I have reread this recently, and I think I got a very different experience this past time, but of the same value that I got the first time around. And he goes into all of the emotions, and not just the difficult ones like shame and guilt and grief, but also love and what it means to feel love and to offer it to the world and to ourselves, and that it is something that we all have the capacity to do and the ability to do, but it is up to us to embrace it and to really follow through with it. So highly recommend this book as well. Of course, I recommend all of these books, but this one was really important at the time that I read it. And I do think that about all these books that came in at the right time. And every time I read one of them, I was like, great, I've achieved this new level of being and I have no more levels to ascend to. I don't believe that anymore. I believe that there's many more levels for me to break through because of how pivotal every single one of these books were. But it was a great book. I thought I was there. I was like, I feel lighter. My relationship with my parents is great. Whatever, like I can deal with my job again. And then I met some new people. I went through some more difficult things living at home, and I hit another wall, and I was like, I cannot be here anymore. I had to move out. I had to. There was no other option. And my parents went back to Bosnia for a few weeks, and it was during that time where I was like, I'm buying a house. I'm getting out of here. I cannot do this. And then it was October of 21 that I had done my closing. So it was September that I had found that house. But it was between May to September that I had no idea what was going on. There was people I had recently met that I was just devastated by constantly, and they were hurt. There was a great deal of hurt that they were creating, and I didn't like my job. I couldn't be there anymore. I just needed to move on. And then I got a new job. I stopped talking to those people. I moved into a new place, and by November of 21, I felt like, again, I had ascended to this new level. I had gotten rid of a few more people. I had stepped away from certain people. I had embraced this new life, and I was like, all right, now I'm in a good place. And then that job got difficult, and I had to face this idea of, man, what is the point of all this? Why am I doing this? What could possibly be the answer to all of these questions. And then I found this book, Man's Search for Meaning. I believe it was recommended by someone. It's recommended by a lot of people, over 16 million copies sold, and I'm sure that number is significantly higher now. And I was like desperate. I was like, I need some kind of help to show me a direction that I need to go on, because I can't find meaning in this work. I thought I would be doing amazing things, and pretty much right off the bat I had issues at work with the boss that I had. There was a lot of issues there, and I was struggling significantly, and I was like, what is the point of all this? I thought I did it. I thought I did all the things you're supposed to do. And then I read this book, and it offered a perspective that it is not what other people want, or what the world thinks of you, or what society tells you to do. It is what you think of yourself and the circumstances that you're in. And Viktor Frankl, if you don't know who that is, he is a survivor of the Holocaust. He lost his parents, his siblings, his wife. He lost everyone in the Holocaust. He was in a concentration camp, and he said the only thing that he was able to get himself through was this idea that they can take everything from me, but they cannot take my view of myself and the world away from me. I can't give that to them. They can't take that from me unless I let them. Everything else they can take forcibly, but unless I hand myself over to them and my view of the world and my thoughts to them, they can't take them. And that was powerful. He shared some really difficult points that he went through, and he faced atrocities and darkness that most people never face, and hopefully never face in their lifetime. And then he went on to go be a psychotherapist to suicidal patients for the rest of his life. I believe he got remarried and found the will to survive and to keep going and to help others. And how incredible that he was able to take such pain and turn it into something where he was able to help other people, and saved a lot of lives, and most importantly saved his own. So his search for meaning became a guiding light for me to understand that this job, these people, they're not the ones who provide thoughts about myself to me. They're the ones who could influence them, but it is ultimately my decision, how I see myself and the world around me, and the decisions that I make. And it came back to this intentional choice thing. Like, what am I doing? How am I doing better? And how am I not doing better? And that job took a lot from me. And if you follow this journey at all, you know that I'm no longer with that company because they chose to let me go. So it was difficult across the board. And then I was in another dark place. I was like, oh my God, I hate being here, and I'm spending all my time here. I was looking for meaning, and I could not find it. I was like, I know, I understand. So that book came around at the start of 2022, and I was just like, oh my God, like that helped. And then I got to the end of 22, and I was just like, man, it was a hard year. There was something else that happened at work that was very difficult to deal with. There was people who left my life that was difficult to deal with, and I was a mess. I had stopped talking to quite a few people who I thought I would never stop talking to. Spoiler, that was not the last time that's happened to me. It happened very recently, and it was just this constant, like, how many more things are coming my way? And then this book came into my life. I believe this was started 23. It was very important, and I picked it up because it said Sarajevo on it, and that is where my family's from Bosnia. So I was like, okay, cool. Whether it's about the war or about something else, I just want to support anyone that's talking about it. And the very opening was amazing because it doesn't talk about the war in Bosnia first. It talks about Italy, and that there was a piece of paper found after in 1945. So this was also just after the World War II had ended, and they found a piece of paper that they believed was a piece written by Tommaso Albinoni, and they named it Albinoni's Adagio, and somebody else finished the piece of writing for Albinoni, or they filled in the blanks where they thought was correct. And most people thought that this was a fraudulent piece of composition. They thought that this was impossible, that this sounds nothing like anything Albinoni had written, and that this was fraudulent, that this was not something he wrote, this was something that somebody else created. And why that piece became important was the cellist of Sarajevo. There was a cellist from the Symphony of Sarajevo who decided to play Albinoni's Adagio every single day in honor of the people who died waiting in line for bread. And for 22 days each day, he honored those people at the time that the bombing happened, which was 4 o'clock in Sarajevo at a bread line. He played Albinoni's Adagio. And he doesn't really go into further detail why that piece was chosen. It's kind of left up to interpretation. But for me, it was this understanding had two things. It was that something that is created after something so insane and difficult happens, it cannot be the same as it was before. That Albinoni's music could not be the same after something like that happens. And the other half was that there is something beautiful that can be created after so much devastation. And that one of the best quotes from this is, "It is not the character of the people who destroyed the city, but the character of the people who rebuild it that matter." And that is the point of him playing in Sarajevo every single day, is to say, it doesn't matter that this devastation happened. It matters that we are moving forward. And not to say that those lines didn't matter, but to say that they tried to take something from us and they took lives, but they can't take the rest of us. They can't take everything from us. And even if you aren't from Sarajevo, and if you don't know anything about that war, if you don't know anything about this, it is important to see the perspective of when you go through something at that scale, you are facing a version of yourself that you never thought you would, that experience is going to change you completely, and that you are going to be a different version of yourself after that. And you're not going to be ready to face that version of yourself until you're in that moment and you have to make those decisions. And that was true of every character. They follow 4 different people in this book. I believe that most of the characters are made up, but quite a few of the stories are real. So it is impressive to see how humanity changes when you're forced to face it at the levels that they did. And it was impressive. And I did a graduation speech at like a party, and I referenced this book, and it was important to me, and I've bought it multiple times, and it's incredible. Highly recommend it. So this was like May of 23. And then I was like, all right, great. Like, I have to be done. Like, I've had to have achieved all of these things. My job isn't awful all the time anymore. I found some friends at work that I really enjoy and that I like being around, and it can't get any harder than this, right? It can't continue to suck. And then it did. And then June of 23 happened, so about a year ago, and I was devastated again. I had an experience that happened that changed me and will forever live with me, or have changed the way that I live or the way that I see the world. And then I stayed at the job. I couldn't stand it anymore, but I was offered the opportunity to do a project that I thought would be really important for my resume and to just learn about myself. And it did. I did learn a great deal, and it was proved to me that I could do it. Apparently not to the company, because the project finished about the beginning of 23 and of January of 24. And that was when I read this book, which I think is a reason why I haven't completely fallen apart, because of all the things that I've faced this year. And it was really important for me to read this one. This was the first book that I read at the start of 2024, and was the only reason why I was able to not feel that bad about myself or bad for myself when everything happened. And it is a book that is written by my mom's friend. So I know the author. I've met her and her kids, and a beautiful story. And it was one of the first things that she did when she came to America. She didn't know English, but she wrote a book as her way of learning English. And after reading the book, you're like, wow, you went through all that, and then you wrote a book that went on to do really well. And she was even honored in a city in Texas for it, where they pick a book that is like the book of the year, and they picked her book one year, and she hopes that it becomes a movie one day. And when you read it, and if you read it, you will understand why. I was reading it and I was like, man, like, I've seen movies with less intense points in it. And she goes through so much, and she loses just about everything, and she almost loses her life, and she gets through it and somehow fights for her life in every way possible so that she can live. And she does, and she ends up moving to America, and she is able to overcome it. At some point, she says, I couldn't cry anymore. There was just no more tears. I couldn't cry. I just had to figure my life out. I had to stand up and say, this is my life, and I'm going to fight for it. And she did. She lost her husband during the war. She was pregnant at the time. She lost her baby, and she lost her arm. She lost so much, and she decided that it wasn't going to be the end, that she was going to fight, and she was able to walk again. She was able to survive. She did an incredible job at writing this book and keeping you engaged and entertained and devastated all at the same time. And you root for her, and then you know that the story isn't going to go in the direction you wanted to, and that she got through it, and she remarried, and she had kids, and she did it. And I genuinely think that if I didn't read it at the beginning of this year, I don't think I could have been able to face everything in quite the same way. I was let go from that job, all those friends that I cared for so much, and those people I had all those amazing experiences with stopped talking to me as well, and it was devastating. And then I looked back at all of these books and all of these people who had incredibly difficult stories before me, and who had way more to lose and way more to fight for. It's what kept me going. And I know now I've read all of these books in the order that I was supposed to. I will put all of them down below, so I hope you guys check them out too. But books, they change you. You are not the same person after you read a book, after you watch a movie, after you talk to someone, after you experience anything with another person. You are not the same person, and you are going to be changed by the world around you. But you can also project that change into a direction that you want, and that everyone is so scared to go back in time to change one little thing. But if only we could understand that is how much power we have in our present moment, and that every little choice we make right now is going to help us become the person that we want to be. And these books were one of those ways that I did get that change and get to direct that change in a certain way. And I don't know what the future holds, and I no longer am interested in predicting it. I have had so many twists and turns that I'm just like, you know what? I'm not even surprised, and I'm not trying to change it. Life is just going to unfold, and I'm going to do my best to project it in a certain way, but I don't know. And since I lost that job, I got a new job, and then I lost that job, and then I moved to a new city, and now I'm trying to figure it out again. And it's difficult to realize that there are people who show you a certain person to you, and then they show you another version of themselves, and that you'll never know why. And that was a question that haunted me at all of those times where I had to change, and these books came into my lives. I was asking why is this happening? Why does this keep going this way? What does this mean? What is this? Why? And all these books have taught me is you don't need to ask why in order to move on. You don't need to understand what they meant or why they didn't. All you have to understand is that you are moving on, and that you are only going to be as affected as you allow yourself to be, and that you need to move on. You have to say enough is enough, and it's your choice to make that. And asking why doesn't matter. Knowing the answer won't help. It won't bring that person back into your life, because you've changed, and that was where I had to get to. It didn't matter why those people treated me the way they did, from the company to the friends to other people that weren't connected to either, who also walked out. It just didn't matter, and the why wouldn't fix it. I had to get to a point where I was like, even if I sat there and they sat there as well and we talked about it, I would never see them the same way, and they would never mean what they once did, because that was ruined. And that's the point, and that's where I go back to the Cellist of Sarajevo, that an experience like that changes you, and you don't go back to who you were. You can't, and you can choose to make something amazing out of it, and something equally as difficult, but in service of something better this time. And that's what all of them did. They took something that was painful, that was difficult, that was hard, and they moved through it, understanding that this path isn't easy, but it is ours, and it's up to us to choose to continue on it. And all of these books are, now that I think of it, pretty intense, but they're not super long, any of them. I guess Letting Go is a little bit long, but I highly recommend them, and they're ones that I have gifted over and over again, and they are very easily the reason why I am where I am, and hopefully I will read the next book that does that for me soon. And if not, all of what happens is changing you, and it's changing me, and it's changing the world around us. So I hope that you change it into the direction that you want it to go, and that you understand you have the power and nobody can take it from you, no matter what they're saying or what they're doing. As long as you are alive, you have the ability to choose again and again. And when you don't like that choice, you can choose again. Let me know what books have changed your perspective in your life, and I will see you soon.